Welcome. Sri Lanka has faced many challenges, numerous challenges over the decades, and includes epidemics, terror attacks, and severe economic crisis. Among the most devastating of these was the civil conflict that lasted over 3 decades, leaving lasting physical as well as psychological scars on countless Sri Lankans. Even today, long after the end of the conflict, its consequences continue to affect communities, particularly in the north and eastern provinces, where displaced families are still rebuilding their lives. While we acknowledge the immense sacrifices made by Sri Lanka's security forces and all those who contributed to ending this war, there are also organizations working quietly, silently, and persistently to address its long-term humanitarian impact. One such organization is the Halo Trust, which has been operating in Sri Lanka since 2002 for over 2 decades, clearing landmines and unexploded ordnance from vast areas of land. So this work has enabled thousands of displaced families to safely return to their homes and livelihoods. To discuss this work and a recent milestone achieved by the Halo Trust in Sri Lanka, we are joined today by Farzana Baduel, a trustee of the Halo Trust who is currently visiting the country. Welcome to the studio, Farzana. And thank you very much for joining with us. Farzana, in addition to her role at the Halo Trust, is the president-elect for 2025 for the Chartered Institute of Public Relations. And she is also the Chief Executive Officer of Curzon PR, a London-based strategic communications consultancy, and serves as a residence PR expert at the University of Oxford's Side Business School, where she mentors entrepreneurs and senior executives on global communication and reputation management. I think with that, we have a lot to discuss today. So thank you very much, Farzana, for joining with us again. So landmines often outlive wars. We know that all these landmines are not founded right after the end of the conflict. Yeah. So silently shaping lives long after peace is declared. So the Halo Trust has spent decades clearing these hidden dangers across the world, including here in Sri Lanka. So if you can start by saying Halo Trust was founded when landmines were still widely accepted as a part of the warfare. So what problem did your founders see that the world was not addressing at that time?
Well, this was all the way back in 1988 in Kabul in Afghanistan. A woman and 2 men came together and they saw the devastation of the mines that were left behind, and they realized that they needed to set up an organization that can deal with the complexity of mines, the safety issue of mines, and also realize that in conflict, the only way communities can move forward is if you remove the mines from the ground. Otherwise, they remain permanent scars of the conflict and communities can't continue with their lives. So they set it up in 1988 in Kabul, in Afghanistan, and since then it has grown and it's now active in over 32 countries and territories around the world.
So coming to the Sri Lankan conflict, before actually coming to the Sri Lankan conflict, I would like to know a little bit about yourself on how did you start and how did you become a part of this Halo Trust organization?
So I always knew about the Halo Trust because I think most people, they understood the Halo Trust because of that one iconic image of the late Princess Diana walking in the minefields of Angola. Yes. And that sort of seared into the collective consciousness. So I was always aware, but I wasn't aware of the scale and the complexity and the layers involved in having to tackle mines and take them out from the land. And so I applied to join their board as a trustee because I knew somebody who was already leaving the board. And the more I learned about the organization, the more fascinated I was, because then I realized that actually, you know, we live in an age of conflict, unfortunately, and nothing can progress after conflict has ended until the Halo Trust come in and they clear the land, because otherwise other NGOs can't go in and deliver food and build shelter. So I realized how pivotal and how important the Halo Trust is in moving a community from conflict to post-conflict. And of course, they're not just in post-conflict countries, they're also in conflict countries like Ukraine, for instance.
Mm-hmm. So with all those things, we are witnessing all those conflicts even at the moment.
Yeah.
So I'm sure, like, if we can contribute from our end to end the suffering a little bit, I think that's one of the greatest achievements in our lives.
Yeah.
So coming to Sri Lankan conflict, like Sri Lanka's civil conflict left vast areas of lands unsafe to this day as well. So preventing families from returning home even after the war ended to about
Yeah.
1.5 decades ago. So can you take us through the initial phases of HALO beginning operations in Sri Lanka, and what did the what was the situation on the ground at that time?
So they entered in Sri Lanka in 2002, so before the conflict had officially ended. And what they first realised is that HALO Trust has a philosophy of ensuring that the team is predominantly, significantly all hired from the local communities, because they are the ones who have that mission mindset, that purpose that they want to help their communities. And so the first thing that they had to do is hire from the local communities, but there also were posed to be a lot of problems because a lot of the local communities, they had their education interrupted. So they had primary, secondary, tertiary education. So they had to create a process of onboarding, recruitment, training, skills development that took that into consideration, those gaps in their education. And so, so that was the first step that they did in order to make sure that the safety protocols are embedded during training. So that was the first challenge that they had to do. And then the second is that they had to survey the land to see what was contaminated and what wasn't contaminated. And once they realized the areas that were contaminated, they had to get them cordoned off. And it wasn't as simple as just cordoning the land off and putting the red signs of danger mines. They had to go and speak to the children, speak to the local communities, and do risk education so the children wouldn't go into the cordoned off areas and think that a mine, they could think it's a toy. Children are very curious. They can see a mine maybe popping out from the soil, and then they can unwittingly touch it and then end up with losing their limbs or even their lives. So the education piece was very critical, not just for the deminers that we recruited, but also for the local communities, for the children. And that wasn't a one-off, it was ongoing, the repeat and reinforcement of risk education. So people knew, because mines were quite new in Sri Lanka when we started, when we first arrived here, not everybody knew what a mine looked like. And also in Sri Lanka, there were 17 different types of mines that were laid down by the Sri Lankan Army and LTTE, and they all looked very, very different. So we had to also educate in what all these 17 different ones looked like. You have anti-personnel mines, you have anti-vehicle mines, you have anti-tilting mines that detonate from either pressure that you place on either side, or even if you move the ground around it, the anti-tilting, they can also explode. So actually the complexity was a big issue to overcome in many respects.
I think that is one of the initial, one of the main obstacles that the HALO Trust had to overcome. So if I ask you a question like this, when you're starting the operations here in Sri Lanka, that was like the peak of the humanitarian conflict in Sri Lanka. So what kind of, how did you manage to, combine with our security forces and, start the process? What kind of a process went into that?
So the first aspect is we have to survey the land to see where the mines are. And we therefore have to do two things. So number one, we speak to the Sri Lankan Army, and they keep records of where their mines were laid. So that was relatively straightforward because they kept good sort of administrative papers, and we worked very closely with the Sri Lankan Army, who have been a huge partner in the removal of the mines. And then with the LTTE mines, we didn't have the paperwork of where they left. So only some of the mines we could locate roughly where the areas are. We then had to go to all the villages, and we had to go and speak to people because they also knew that, they heard of a mine exploding here that affected their livestock, or children reported. And so we used those different information in order to find out where the mines were, to cordon them off. And that's the first step, is the surveying of the land. But then it's very complicated because when you have tsunami, when you have cyclones, when you have the landslides and you have severe weather conditions, if you have two fields next to each other, one is contaminated, one has been cleared, then the mines start moving. in these severe weather conditions, and then we have to restart again and then survey the land because the mines then move around. And then obviously the issue in Sri Lanka is particularly complex because it's not just in the fields, it's in the jungles. It's also in the lagoons, and then it's also in the coastal areas. So you have to then have these amphibious excavators with this huge technical equipment to be able to go into the aquatic environment. So the complexity is very high in Sri Lanka. And Sri Lanka, actually the mines that were laid down in Sri Lanka is one of the most densely populated mine areas in the world because of the conflict that lasted, was it 27 years?
Yes.
So just the length of time of the conflict, and also the relatively contained area that the mines were laid down, resulted in Sri Lanka being one of the most densely mined places in the land, and with the complexity that it was found in the jungles and in the fields, and also in the in the lagoons, and also in the coastal areas. And that's why it's such a time-consuming time to take the mines out.
You know, Sri Lanka is committed to becoming a mine-free country under the Anti-Personnel Mine Ban Convention, or widely known as Ottawa Treaty.
Yes.
So from your perspective, from Halo Trust perspective, how close Sri Lanka today to becoming completely mine-free?
Well, the hope was it will be mine-free in the next couple of years, but a number of things have happened that will prevent that from taking place. So number one is the recontamination of fields due to the severe weather conditions, which means we have to restart and re-clear. The second is Halo Trust. Over the years of being here, over 20 years, the team have fluctuated from over 1,200 team members to over 800 team members, and that reduction has been because of our funding has been reduced. Now, we are incredibly grateful for the funding that we receive. We receive funding from the United States, from Norway, from Canada, from Japan, from Germany, and until recently the United Kingdom. But there's been a lot of international aid cuts that have taken place recently. And also in some countries, they class Sri Lanka as a middle income country, so therefore it's not given the priority in terms of funds. And so there's been a reduction and that's resulted in a reduction of our team members from the height to 1,200 to around 850. And that then slows the pace. So we used to take out about 1,000 mines a month. Now we're roughly at about 750 mines a month. And so that is one aspect, is a reduction of funding. And that's why we are very keen to raise awareness of Halo Trust in order to ensure that we are that we are visible for those who wish to support the work we're doing, because our mission is to make Sri Lanka mine-free, and it's as simple as that. But we need support. The government has been a great support, the Sri Lankan government, as well as the Sri Lankan army, as well as these other governments are supporting us, both technical assistance as well as financial assistance. But actually the real heroes of our story are our deminers, because they are all from the local communities, and they are the ones who every day are putting their lives at risk to remove the mines that have laid down during the conflict in order for their communities to move on.
Great. I think it's time for us to go for a short break, and I believe that we can talk in depth about what operations and how difficult it is to really make Sri Lanka a mine-free country. So with that, I think let's go for a small break. Stay with us. We continue to discuss the importance of Halo Trust, and we are discussing with Farzana Baduel. We will see you after this short break. Welcome back. We are in conversation with Farzana Baduel, trustee of the Halo Trust, on mine clearance here in Sri Lanka. So before the break, we were talking about recruiting locals and training them to do this demining process and everything. So you have recruited about 1,200 now, even though it has reduced a bit and because of the funding issues and everything. So if you can elaborate on that, and why is employing people from local war-affected communities especially so central to Halo's model? So
Halo has realized over the years that actually the people who are most effective, who are most purpose-led, who really genuinely care, that it's more than just a job, are the local people that have been impacted by conflict. And so we always have a model that we have bare minimum tiny nucleus of international staff that are on the ground, and the majority are all local. So when you think of the numbers that we've had, Halo is one of the largest employers in the north, between 1,200 and 850 over the years. For instance, now we have only 5 international staff, so very small. It's very much led locally, and what is extraordinary is that they have brought in the level of innovation because they're so committed to Halo Trust, the local teams, that they have been here for 5, 10, 15 years. I went to go and meet them, and I went to Kilinochchi and I went to Jaffna. I mean, it's, the whole of Sri Lanka is beautiful, but it was the first time I went to the north, and you saw the beautiful rice paddy fields, and it was wonderful to see that the land was given back to the people. And it ended up having the land given back to people that positively impacted 280,000 people. So 280,000 people got their homes back. The farmers got their land back so that they can also have the dignity of earning their own money. And it was wonderful because the local team, they took me to go and meet some of the local beneficiaries who got their land back maybe 1 or 2 years ago. And I went to go and meet one particular couple who's an elderly gentleman and his wife. And he was very proud. He brought me into his house, beautiful house. And he told me, through translation, he said he got his land back 2 years ago from Halo Trust, and the Halo Trust local team were there. And he said, I was harassing them. Every week I was saying, when am I going to get my land back? When am I going to get my land back? Because also the people who've been displaced, they know the team of Halo Trust. They are from the same community. So he said, I was harassing them all the time. I finally got my land back. I'm very happy. He said that the Sri Lankan government built the home for him, and it was a beautiful home. And the land is very fertile because when Halo Trust give it back, because we have to go through every inch of the land, this soil is tilled, which makes it very fertile.
Yes.
And in the 2 years, he had planted the most beautiful fruit trees, and he was plucking the fruit from the trees and feeding it to me and telling me that after 20 years of being displaced, moving from year to year around Jaffna, he finally got his home back. He finally had a beautiful home built. He could then get his children married off, and he said that he now sleeps at peace. So there are wonderful stories, and that was only done by the local communities who came into Halo Trust, and they really led. And they led not only in terms of removing the landmines and also the mines from the aquatic environments and the lagoons, but they also brought innovation. And they are a center of excellence for the Halo Trust. People from the Halo Trust that are onboarded around the world, they come and fly in to Jaffna, to Kilinochchi, to Mullaitivu. They're trained by the Sri Lankan team because their center of excellence is so high. They have created their own unique standard operating processes, particularly with the complexity of finding mines in the water. And that's now used by Halo teams around the world. For instance, in Ukraine, they're now beginning to find that the mines are in aquatic environments, and they're using the SOPs that have been created by the Sri Lankan team. So the Sri Lankan deminers are a huge center of excellence for the Halo Trust, and the rest of the teams around the world, they look to them for the training, they look to them for the innovation and the excellence.
I think that's wonderful to hear. I mean, as a war-torn country and being able to help other countries in order to make a peaceful life, I think that's one of the positive sides that we can see here in Sri Lanka. So again, coming to employment, women are a significant part of the Halo Trust group. So was that a deliberate decision, and what impact has it done on the families and the communities in Sri Lanka?
So what's very core to Halo's mission, apart from ensuring that the teams are local, because we want to make sure that the money that we raise, it goes into creating employment for local communities, and it goes into the community, and that's very important. A second pillar that's very important for us is ensuring that we also provide livelihoods for women, because what we find from research is providing livelihoods for women has a very positive compound effect. And so 42% of our brave deminers are women. And these women are incredible. I met them, and they are often leading the team as well. So we often have a unit team of 9 people, of which 2 of them are medical, because safety is paramount at Halo Trust. And the unit commanders are, are also women, and they are extraordinary. And they were telling me about their lives. They wake up in the morning, feed their children, feed their families, then they come to work, they do the demining, and then they go back home and then continue to feed and raise their families. They are extremely hardworking. They have strong leadership skills. And also Halo Trust provides not only technical education in terms of the demining, but also they provide vocational skills as well, computer literacy and so forth. Because
for the employees only, or for their families as well?
For the employees. So Halo is very big on vocational, because Halo knows that one day the deminers will lose their jobs when the mines are cleared. And so we have these fields, and once the field, we know 1 year in advance is going to be cleared. 1 year in advance we start a vocational program where we start looking to see what skills can we give them to ensure that when they leave the Halo Trust, they can then move and get jobs elsewhere. And that is one thing that we would very much love your audience to get in contact with us at Halo Trust. We're looking to create MOUs, partnerships with local employers who can tell us what skills they need our deminers to have in order for them to move from the Halo Trust to making sure that their livelihoods are not interrupted. And we will provide that vocational training in their last year with Halo Trust. So they leave Halo Trust and they end up going to another employment. And that's very important for us, because when people come through Halo Trust, we care about their livelihoods, not only during their time with Halo Trust, but also after, because we want to ensure that those livelihoods are not interrupted.
Going to a global context, I would like to ask you, despite these international bans, landmines continue to injure civilians across the world, as you said, Russian-Ukraine conflict and other conflicts around the world. Still, mines are being used to, harm civilians as well as military organizations and everything. And major powers like Russia, China, India, Pakistan, even USA has not joined treaties like Ottawa Treaty or something like that. So after seeing the human cost of landmine firsthand, has your understanding about war and peace changed?
I think for me, when I joined the Halo Trust a few months ago, they said to me straight away, you have to go to the field. You can't sit around shuffling papers on the board. You need to go to the field. And out of the 32 countries, my family originally from Pakistan. So South Asia, it's like a second home. And so of course I chose Sri Lanka as the first place to go. And when I went to Jaffna and Kilinochchi and I met the people who have suffered displacement and collective trauma. And it was so wonderful and positive to see them working together with the Sri Lankan army, with the Sri Lankan government, and watching this community move from conflict to post-conflict. And it's relatively recent, so the memories are there. And it did change my perception of how much admiration I have for these communities that have suffered conflict. And Sri Lanka as a whole has suffered conflict. And I have huge admiration for the Sri Lankan people that they can overcome 27 years of conflict and start sowing the seeds of peace and unity. And it doesn't happen overnight. And it happens on multiple layers. It's not just taking the mines out. It's also rebuilding trust between communities. It's finding ways to collaborate. It's about creating new positive memories of collaboration that one day, with hope, will dilute the painful memories that all the communities have shared. And it is incredibly complex. And I'm not naive that I do not understand the history. I understand that it is very painful for the communities. But I just think these deminers are the heroes. They are the ones that women, men, you have fathers and sons, mothers and daughters working alongside each other, and they are committed to move into a new era of positivity, of hope, of development, of bringing the country together. Because until the last mine has been removed in Sri Lanka, the healing can't take place, because those mines, they're a scar of the conflict. And for the country to heal, you have to take those remnants of war out of the land. And Halo Trust has taken 1 million explosive items from the ground, of which 300,000 are mines. But there are also, improvised devices, explosive devices, grenades, and so forth. But we need to take them all out. And I think, none of us should rest until the last one is taken out.
I think you mentioned one of the achievements in Sri Lanka. I think the Halo Trust cleared the 300,000 mine.
Yeah.
If you can give us a small description of where was this mine was extracted.
Gosh,
And,
it happened. It happened relatively recently, and Jaffna in particular. We have active minefields happening that we're removing the mines from. In all areas in Kilinochchi, in Mulativo, and also in Jaffna. So we are actively working across all those minefields. And in terms of 300,000, so it was a very special moment for us because 300,000th mine to be removed. And of course, we always use the word landmine, but actually it's not just in the land, it is also in the lagoons and in the coastal areas. And it was a huge, huge milestone for us. And the 300,000th mine is also a milestone, but also is the fact that we have crossed also this year the 1 million remnants of war that has been taken out, because there's also the unexploded grenades and all others. But it was particularly important for us to celebrate this in Sri Lanka because it has been such a long, hard journey to get here from 1992, and the teams are so dedicated. They have been, a lot of the people who joined us in the early years are still with us, and they have gone from juniors to not only seniors, but they are teaching demining excellence around the world. They are so competent, so innovative, that we have our onboarding process of people coming from around the world to come and learn from the Sri Lankan team. The Sri Lankan team are so innovative. They have upgraded our standard operating processes, and we are now using those in places like Ukraine. So Sri Lankan team, the deminers, having been committed for so long in demining, they have now innovated, and we have created bespoke equipment with their inputs that the United States have been bringing us that will allow us to remove from water areas and they've given us amphibious excavators, but they have created them bespoke in collaboration with the Sri Lankan teams. So I think Sri Lanka should be incredibly proud of the Sri Lankan deminers.
I think with that we are nearing the end of this discussion. But before ending it, I would like to ask you to briefly answer what gives you hope when you look at the post-war communities here in Sri Lanka?
I think what gives me hope is when I went to go and meet the elderly gentleman that had moved back into his land after 20 years of displacement, and he was smiling, and just the act of him being able to use the land around his home for building these fruit trees, picking the fruit, and then peeling them and giving them to me, and we shared the fruit together. And I thought that was such a beautiful symbolic act, and it made me feel incredibly proud to be in Sri Lanka and to play a tiny part. But again, we are paper pushers on the board. The heroes are the Sri Lankan deminers.
I think that's all the time we have for today. Thank you, Farzana Baduel, for sharing your insight and joining us with, giving us your valuable time here with us at Derana. So we were in conversation with Farzana Baduel, Trustee of Halo Trust, on mine clearance efforts in Sri Lanka, past, present and future. So that's all the time we have for today. Stay with Derana for more discussions like this and enjoy the rest of today's program. Thank you. Have a great day.